In the heart of downtown Baltimore lies the Maryland Reception, Diagnostic, and Classification Center, commonly called Diagnostic, which is a place where people convicted of a crime go to be classified to a particular prison based on their security level. December the 5th, 2019, I was released from Reception, Diagnostic, Classification Center after serving 48 years. I was given $50, no identification, and no way of knowing how to get home. I'm not from Baltimore, I'm from Washington, D.C. Now I heard my family member call me. I realized then that I had a way home. This is the state that most people are released from the Maryland system and prison in general. No source of income, no identification, and no place to stay. So I had a few items. So I had to go get my stuff from out of the problem. So they let everybody else, look, everybody came out the back, but they let them go, pew, pew, pew. So most of them dudes were like, wasn't long term, they was familiar with the layout, right? Me, I wasn't, I know I'm familiar with Green Mountain, Madison, right? Me and another dude standing down here on the corner, I'm like, man, I gotta get this. Cause I ain't know my people was gonna be here. I ain't know if they had got, because they wouldn't let me make no collect calls. Oh, okay. Right? So every time, and I had money. I had money on the books. I'm serious, they wouldn't let you make the call. So I kept on dialing, and it would go to a certain point, then it cut off. But my sister said, look, come on, he must be getting something going on. Let's go down there. This is what this show is about. This show is about giving voice to the voiceless. As we venture into the segments and the stories that we'll be telling, we want people to take away from these stories the human side of these stories. More than anything else, this is not about politics, this is about humanity. We're trying to address the concerns of people, their families, their friends, and their loved ones that's affected by the prison industrial complex, be it labor, be it medical, be it the food, be it being released without identification and just a minimal amount of money to get home, and you don't even live in the city that they release you from. Rattling the Bars will be covering a multitude of subject matters and a multitude of issues, and we ask that you stay tuned and tune in. Welcome to this episode of Rattling the Bars. Recently, I had the opportunity to talk to Bianca Tylek, Executive Director of Worth Rises. Worth Rises is an organization whose mission is to complete abolishment of the prison industrial complex as it now exists. They have a strategy where they identify major corporations that are investing in or exploiting labor out of the prison industrial complex. You'll be astonished at how many corporations have their tentacles in the prison industrial complex and the amount of money they're sucking out of it in astronomical numbers. But first, we'll go to this interview I had with Lionel Sly, who was on one of our previous episodes, to talk about the impact the prison industrial complex is having on the communities at large. We're in East Baltimore at Latrobe Projects talking about how in the shadow of the Maryland Penitentiary and Diagnostic, the housing projects are affected by the existence of these prisons. Men and women walk out of their houses in Latrobe into the Maryland prison system. And why? Because of the devastation of the social conditions that exist in this particular community. Now my interview with Lionel Sly. When I first got out, I thought I'd be out and not be in a van. These vans right here, this is all our modes of transportation. 3-piece, shackle, and that's how we being transported.
When we said about the gloom and doom, you know, one of the first things that I noticed when I got to MRDC was the projects and the kids playing outside of, you know, their area. Looking out and seeing the kids and they looking up at this place. So, I'm making a connection of, that pipeline,
Yeah.
because just all they see.
And then when that's what he seen, what I seen when I came here, this building wasn't right here. This was a parking lot. This building wasn't right here. This was a lot. So the kids had a clean shot to the Maryland Penitentiary. So what they seen, so every kid that lived in these projects right here, this is what they seen. They seen barbed wire on the Maryland Penitentiary. Then they seen another big building come up. There's another prison. Then they seen this is a prison. And outside their front door, what they see when they come out their house is barbed wire and a wall.
So it might be ill-concealed to us, but for them, in their mindset, this was a perfect, oh man, we got our clients and our, what you call it when you check in the hotel, our patrons, you know what I mean, right here. Because they got their industry, they got their pipeline, they got, you know what I mean, everything that they designed this to be.
As you can see from our conversation with Lionel Sly, the prison industrial complex has a devastating impact on everyone. The men and women that's in prison, the communities that they come from, the infrastructure they build on. The entire system has devastating consequences that should be recognized and addressed. Some communities that they're building, it's the major source of their industry, like in Attica and Rikers, Hagerstown, Maryland, Louisiana. But some communities that they're building it for one reason only, to occupy the psyche of the community. So people walk out of their houses every day, this is all they see, and ultimately they find themselves in these spaces. But now you're gonna see who's behind this. The corporations that's responsible for this exploitation. I had the list right here. The Prison Industrial Corporation database put out by Worth Risers. Super Ammo, Visa Outdoors, Warburg Pizzas, 3M, T-Mobile, Tyson Foods, Access Corporation, Advanced Technology Groups, major corporations that are using prison labor to exploit it, profit, and profit alone, with no regard to human life. Now my conversation with Bianca Tylek. Yeah, we're talking to Bianca Tylek from Worth Risers. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Bianca, and how you got in this space.
Sure. Thank you so much again, Mansa, for having me, and so great to meet you. And I'm glad that you're home. My name is Bianca Tylek, as you noted. I am based in the New York area, and I'm the executive director and founder at Worth Risers. We are a nonprofit criminal justice advocacy organization that works nationally to end the exploitation of people who are incarcerated and their loved ones and dismantle the prison industry. I came to this where I founded the organization. It's 7.5 years ago now. And we've been doing, a tremendous amount of work all over the country towards our mission. And I come to this work through a few different sort of paths. I think most recently, I'm an attorney. Before that, I was on Wall Street. And so I actually worked in the sort of investment banking and corporate sector. And then, I think previously what really makes me passionate about this issue is that I was myself an adjudicated youth and had others in my life who had experienced incarceration and had, were touched by this system. And all of those sort of experiences collectively have brought me to this point.
Worth Risers is dedicated to dismantling the prison industrial complex. It's an abolition group. And as I listened to some of the things that you talked about, I thought about the war in Vietnam when the North first became known for their ferocious fighting, where they had what they call the Tet Offense. And the Tet Offense was like when they had their initial salvo of repelling or resisting the United States and South Vietnam. And I thought when I heard some of the ways you was attacking this industry, that came to mind how systematic your group is in terms of dismantling, as you say, dismantling this group.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. So, I would say we have a 3-part strategy that we deploy at the organization, and it is narrative, policy, and corporate. And so each one of those tentacles is sort of a part of how we approach the industry, and specifically not so much guilting it as much as demanding and forcing it and pressuring it into better, sort of getting out or not exploiting our people in the same way. And so just to expand a little bit on each, our narrative work is really designed to help educate the sort of populace, the American people, and beyond on the harms that the prison industry is committing. I think in particular, we know that, the prison industry is an $80 billion industry, more than that these days. And a lot of people just simply do not know and are not familiar with it, right? Folks who have done time, like yourself, are familiar with, for example, the cost of phone calls in prison. But a lot of people walking the streets are not, right? They don't know that phone calls are so expensive. They don't know the cost of commissary. They don't know that people pay medical copays. They don't know that people are making pennies, if anything, an hour for work. And I think often when we talk about these things, people are pretty surprised, right? Because all of the modern media, right, has people convinced that you go to prison, you get everything you need, and it's some kind of luxurious, cushy place to be. And so a lot of our role is to simply, through our narrative work, what we're trying to do is get people to understand the reality of prisons and jails. Both what the experiences are of people there, the exploitation that happens, and then importantly at the hands of who, and that's the industry, right? And so we do everything from published research to storytelling and beyond to help people really understand what the prison industry is. So that's sort of the narrative work, and that really builds the foundation because we need informed people in order to be able to, sort of cultivate their outrage into action. And that leads us to our policy work. Our policy work is really designed to undermine the business model of the industry. And so we work to change legislation and regulations that would sort of hinder the ability of these companies to continue to exploit people in the exact same ways. And so, for example, what that means is when it comes to prison telecom, where we know that, 1 in 3 families with an incarcerated loved one is going into debt over the simple cost of calls and visits. And, the large majority of those folks are people are women who are paying for these calls, right? And so what we have done in the last about 5 or so years is we've started a sort of movement to make communication free in prisons and jails. We passed the first piece of legislation in New York City in 2018 to do so, and since then we've been able to pass legislation at the county, state, and federal level to make communication entirely free. And today, over 300,000 people who are incarcerated have access to free phone calls. And so, that changes the business model, revolutionizes the space entirely. We also managed to pass game-changing regulations at the FCC to curb the exorbitant charging of phone calls in those places that still do charge for calls. And then finally, in our corporate side of the work, we sort of harness the work we do on the narrative side and the policy side to bring these corporations that are exploiting our communities to account, right? And really, in some cases, shut them down. And so we have companies that we've had investors divest. We have removed their executives from the boards of cultural institutions like museums. We have blocked mergers and acquisitions. I mean, we've done all types of sort of corporate strategies when it comes to those who are exploiting folks who are incarcerated and their loved ones. And, we're bringing some of them to their knees, fully to bankruptcy. And so that is, the kind of work that we do, and, really stress that it's time that this system stop responding to the profit motives of a few.
Okay, let's broaden this examination, because in California they was trying to get a proclamation passed about the 13th Amendment, because the genesis of all this is come out of the legalization of slavery under the 13th Amendment. I think that a lot of what we see in the concerns of us versus the interests of them comes out of the fact that they can under anyone duly convicted of a crime can be utilized for slave labor. And in California, they voted against this proclamation. How do you see is there a correlation between the 13th Amendment, prison industrial complex, and if it is, and you recognize that, how do y'all look at that? Because this industry is always fluid, it's continuing to grow, it's got multiple tentacles, and it's all designed around profit. So when it comes to profit and capitalism, profit is profit is profit. That's their philosophy. So however they get it, whoever they get it from, but in this case, they got a cash cow. Talk about that.
So we actually run a national campaign called the End the Exception campaign that is specifically about the 13th Amendment. So we're very close to this particular part of the fight.
Right.
So if you visit endtheexception.com, you'll see that entire campaign, which is, like I said, it's a campaign to pass a new constitutional amendment that would end the exception in the 13th Amendment.
Right.
And while we run the national campaign at the federal level, which has over 90 national partners, a lot of states are taking on similar causes, right, including the state of California. And so California, was one of several states in the last 5 or 6 years that brought a state constitutional amendment through a ballot initiative. 8 others have won in the last 5 years. So I do think, despite the fact that I have thoughts about California, despite the fact that California lost, other states like Alabama, Tennessee, Oregon, Vermont have all passed. And so I remain hopeful that it's something that we can do both at the state level, but also at the federal level. I think, unfortunately, California lost, I think, for various reasons, both the moment in time in California. There was also Proposition 36, which, was expanding sort of tough on crime policies.
Right.
And I think Prop 6 got a little bit mixed up into that. The language of Prop 6 was really not particularly helpful. And I think some of the local efforts also needed to coalesce. And had those things happen, maybe, and hopefully it would have passed. It lost by, a relatively small margin, albeit it did lose. And so I think your question, though, about how do these things relate? I mean, I guess what I'd say is I just agree, right, with you, which is that I think that exploitation in prisons and jails is absolutely rooted in antebellum slavery, right? I think that what the Emancipation Proclamation and 13th Amendment in large part did was certainly, obviously free a lot of people, but it also transitioned slavery behind walls where you can't see it. And then our carceral system, because in the years that followed during sort of Reconstruction, the prison population went from being, 99% white to being 99% Black. Many of the practices of antebellum slavery were shifted into the carceral setting and became normalized in that setting and continue today. Right. I tell people all the time, when you think of solitary confinement, which as you know, is often referred to as the hole or the box. Those are terms that come from antebellum slavery, right? Like when enslaved people disobeyed, their enslavers, they would be put in what was called the hot box, right? Or a literal hole, and held there in darkness, in solitary, without food, separated from the family, things like that. And those are essentially punishments that we've just modernized, but don't actually change, the true function of them. They're meant to break down people into obedience, right? And the same terminology is used and the same practices are used. Consider another example, right? When people who were enslaved, would disobey their enslavers, they would often be separated from their families, right? Their children would be sold off, or their spouse would be sent away. Well, similarly, when people who are incarcerated, exhibit what the system would call disobedience, they can be denied visits and phone calls with their families, contact, right? Like all these sort of penal sanctions that exist today were the same ones that existed then, just in a newer 25 version. And so I'd say, I think much of, and that's not to obviously mention the most obvious aspect, which people in prison are forced to work, and they're forced to work at, often for essentially nothing, and then are expected to sort of be grateful for crumbs when given 15 cents or 30 cents on the hour, right? Or something like that. And so, I think it would be foolish for anyone to suggest that the system isn't one that was adapted from antebellum slavery.
As you can see from our conversation with Bianca Tylek, the extent to which the prison industrial complex and corporate America merge is beyond imagination. She was once involved with the criminal justice system. This in and of itself helped her to focus on what she wanted to do. She worked on Wall Street, and while on Wall Street, she started seeing the impact that corporate America was having on the prison industrial complex, the profit margin. From this, she developed this strategy and this organization on how to attack it. As you can see, she's very effective, as is her organization, in dismantling the prison industrial complex. Recently, I had the pleasure and opportunity to speak to some young people at the University of Maryland College Park. The group is the Young Democrat Socialists of America. You'll see from these clips how engaging these conversations were, and when they say we look to our future, remember, our movement started on the college campuses. The intelligent element of society started organizing. As they started organizing, they got the grassroots communities involved, and this is what we'll be getting to see once again.
So today we have a speaker event with Mansa Musa, aka Charles Hopkins. He is a former Black Panther, political prisoner. He's done a lot of activism after re-entering society. He spent nearly 5 decades in prison, and that kind of radicalized him in his experience. And you can learn a lot more about him today during this Q&A.
We're about completely abolishing the prison system. What would that look like? And we was having this conversation. What do that look like? You gonna open the doors up and let everybody out? I've been in prison 40 years. It's some people that I've been around in prison. If I see them on the street the day of tomorrow, I might go call the police on them. Because I know that's how, their thinking is. But at the same token, in a civil society, we have an obligation to help people. So, and that's what we should be doing. People have been traumatized, and trauma becoming vogue now. Everybody like, oh, trauma experience. So trauma becoming vogue, but people have been traumatized and have not been treated for their trauma. So they dial down on it, and that become the norm. So we need to be in a society where we're healing people. And that's what I would say when it comes to the abolition. Yeah, we should abolish prison as they exist now. They're cruel, they're inhumane. You got the guards in Rikers Island talking about protesting and walkout, wildcat strike, because they saying that the elimination of solitary confinement is a threat to them. How is it a threat to you that you put me in a cell for 3 years on end, bringing my meal to me, and say that if you eliminate this right here, me as a worker is going to be threatened by that not existing? How's that? That don't even make sense. But this is the attitude that you have when it comes to the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex is very profitable. The prison industrial complex became like an industry in and of itself. Every aspect of it has been privatized. The telephone's been privatized. The medical been privatized. The clothing been privatized. So you got a private entity saying, I'll make all the clothes for prisons. You got another private entity saying, I want the telephone contract for all prisons. You got another company saying, I want to be responsible for making the beds, the metal and all that, which leads me to Maryland Correction Enterprise. Maryland Correction Enterprise is one of the entities that does this. There's a private corporation that has preferential bidding rights on anything that's being done in Maryland. I'm not going to say these chairs, but I'm going to say any of them tags that's on your car that's Maryland is Maryland Enterprise. I press tags. So I know that to be a fact. A lot of the desks that you in your classroom come from Maryland Correction Enterprise. So what they giving us? They gave us 90 cents a day, and you get a bonus. Now you get the bonus based on how much you produce. So everybody so now you trying to get, okay, I'm trying to get like $90 a month. I'm just started. So somebody been there for a while might be getting $2 a day and some. We pressing tags like till your elbows was on fire because you trying to make as much money as you possibly can. You trying to produce many tags you possibly can to make money. But they getting billions, they getting millions of dollars from the labor.
In your previous podcast episode, you interviewed the state senator, and he mentioned the 13th Amendment and the connection between prison labor and slavery. So what do you think are some of the connections between the prison abolition movement and the historical movement for the abolition of slavery?
And that right now, the 13th Amendment says that slavery is legal. Slavery is illegal except for involuntary servitude if you duly convicted of a crime. So if you're duly convicted of a crime, you can be treated as a slave. And the difference between that and the abolition movement back in the historical was the justification. The justification for now is you've been convicted of a crime. Back then, I just kidnapped you, brought you here, and made you work. So the disconnect was, this is inhuman. You taking people and turn them into chattel slaves. Versus, the reason why I can work you from sun up to sundown, you committed a crime. But the reality is, you put that in there so that you could have free labor. All that is a Jim Crow law, black code. It's the same. It's the same in and of itself. It's not no different. You work me in a system. You in some states they don't even pay you at all. South Carolina, they don't even pay you, but they work you. In Louisiana, they still walk. They got police. They got the guards on horses with shotguns, and they out there in the fields. In some places, in North Carolina, in Alabama, they work you in some of the most inhumane conditions, like freezers, women and men. Put you to work you in a meat plant in the freezer and don't give you the proper gear to be warm enough to do the work. And then if you complain because they use coercion, say, okay, you don't want to work, we're going to take the job from you, transfer you to a prison where now you're going to have to fight your way out. You're going to literally have to go in there, get a knife, and defend yourself. So this is your choice. Go ahead and work in this inhumane conditions, or say no and go somewhere and be sent back to a maximum security prison where you had to fight your way out. So now it's no different. Only difference is it's been legislated, it's been legalized under the 13th Amendment. And abolition, in response to the abolition, so we've been trying to change the 13th Amendment. We had an attempt in California where they put a bill out to try to get it reversed. And the state went against it. The state was opposed to it. Because why would I want to stop having free labor? The firefighters in California, they do the same work that the firefighters right beside them. They do the same work, the same identical work. They fighting fire, their lives are in danger. They getting like 90 cents a day, maybe $90 a month. They don't have no 401k, they don't have no retirement plan, and they being treated like everybody else. Or go out there and fight the fire. So yeah, in terms of abolition, the abolition movement is to try to change the narrative and get the 13th Amendment taken off out of state constitution. Because a lot of states, they adopted it. They adopted it in their own state constitution, a version of the 13th Amendment that says that except if you've been duly convicted for a crime, you can be treated as a slave. If you've been convicted of a crime, you can be treated as a slave. That's basically the bottom line of it. That's our reality. So as we move forward, my message to y'all is don't settle for mediocrity. Don't settle for nothing less. You know, whatever you're thinking that you think should be done, do it. If you think that, but more importantly, in doing it, make sure it is having an impact. There you have it, Rattling the Bars. As you can see from these conversations, the seriousness that corporation has on the prison industrial complex, how they're exploiting prison labor with impunity. We've seen this from the conversation we had with Bianca Tylek, who talked about her involvement with the criminal justice system. But more importantly, how she worked on Wall Street, how she developed this strategy of dismantling the prison industrial complex by going straight to the heart of the matter, corporate America. Her strategy, the organization strategy, is to dismantle it one corporation at a time. Or we also seen from our conversation with Lionel Sly, as we talked about the impact that these corporations have on the community. How most communities live in the shadow of major prisons, like in East Baltimore, the Troll Project, where kids come out every day and see these buildings and ask their parents, what is that? And their parents say, oh, that's where you're going to go if you keep doing what you're doing, or that's where your uncle's at, or you don't want to go there. At any rate, it has no positive value to their psyche. But more importantly, we've seen how the youth are taking a stand to change and find their place in the struggle. The exception clause and exception movement to abolish the 13th Amendment is constant and on the rise. We have suffered some major setbacks with trying to get legislation passed, but the fact that we have a consensus on this has to go, because this is the reason why we find ourselves in this situation where corporations have unlimited access to free prison labor with impunity. We ask that you give us your feedback on these episodes. More importantly, we ask that you tell us what you think. Do you think this exception clause should be passed? Do you think they should abolish the 13th Amendment? Or do you think that corporations should be able to profit off of free prison labor? Do you think that communities should not be overshadowed by prisons? That our children should have the right to be in an environment that's holistic? Or do you think that our youth that's taking a stand against corporate America, fascism, and imperialism should be given coverage? That institutions of higher learning should be held accountable for who they invest in? Tell us what you think. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work. So please, tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.